how can we use Ayurveda to improve our fertility, improve our PMS symptoms, and have better periods, apart from living according to the earth cycle?
One of the biggest problems that is happening today in the world with women, and when I work with women in fertility, is we've chosen lifestyles that are overly slow, they're overly hard, excessive protein consumption, working out too much. All of that is leading to a hardening of the system and hormonal imbalance. Keeping yourself in your feminine energy has a lot to do with fertility. You can use tools like meditation, breath work, music, dance, all of that to activate what I call your lunar.
Hi, my name is Aggie, and this is Biohacking Bestie. The one-stop shop for a modern queen, where you can find biohacking courses, self-growth courses, and where you can find the most incredible community of women so you can hit all of your biohacking goals and beyond.
I am so excited to talk to you. Honestly, I mean, when I saw the work that you do, and to be like the number one female biohacker, I mean, we really need to start having this conversation. You know, like females need to take some lead in this. It's longevity and biohacking and all of this, even though my world is quite different, but we essentially do the same things in different ways. Yeah. But I think we need to have more female-led conversations in the mainstream. So
100%. And I love talking to other women. And I think, you know, in my bio, I put it as that I'm like a top US biohacker. And this is, you know, I'm 36. My entire life, I would be the last one in line. I would never call myself as like top or this. And I'm like, I'm not really top, but as a woman, I'm going to claim that space because all the top guys are guys. So I'm just going to be like, you know,
you own it.
Yeah, I'm going to just like claim it and ask for forgiveness, not permission.
I'd say you just say you're welcome, you know. So
yeah, I think I love
it. It is.
And I think it's so beautiful that you're here because it's like a big part of what I want to do. It's like it doesn't really matter what people's journey to health is, you know. And there's so much wisdom in Ayurveda. I started exploring Chinese medicine recently. There's so much wisdom there. There's the biohacking, right? It doesn't really matter what modality works particularly for you. It's almost like you can't really go wrong because at the end of the day, all of these modalities, what they really say is like, see what's best for you, you know?
I completely agree. And I think like this, in this era of all this excessive information, we're all just finding our way, you know, whatever, we're all just finding our formula that works for us. And I think all of these, exploring these different avenues are like exploring different formulas. You know, whatever you get, that 2 + 2 is 4. You do 1 + 1 + 1. You do 2 × 2. Whatever it is.
Yeah. What's your story about Ayurveda? Like, how did you get into it? And do you have like a health journey?
Absolutely. So honestly, I was raised in a joint family where my grandfather was an Ayurvedic healer. Oh. So I say that Ayurveda to me is like a first language. It's as natural and normal to me as breathing is.
Wow.
But I was also immersed in a lot of spirituality. So like Jain philosophy, Hindu philosophy, Buddhist philosophy. We spent Saturdays doing yoga and pranayam. And I went for my first 15-day Vipassana retreat when I was 15. My 10-day Vipassana retreat when I was 15. So I was immersed in this. I was immersed in how we can live healthier, happier, how we can heal ourselves and kind of become agents for healing. So I would say that this is the life I chose because this is what my soul wanted to do. And it's actually never been any other way. And then I got a formal education in Ayurveda. And then when I went into the Ayurvedic world, I realized that I was quite disheartened because it wasn't practiced the way I had imagined it would be practiced. So my journey is really to bring Ayurveda back to its core, is to really work with people to teach them what their body already knows, using the basic principles of Ayurveda.
So beautiful. So what is Ayurveda for those who are just like kind of heard the word but are not sure?
So Ayurveda translates into the science of life, and that's what Ayurveda is. Here in the West, Ayurveda has become very popular, for some of the ingredients, like turmeric, ashwagandha, shilajit. So because these are mentioned in the Ayurvedic text literature, it's become famous for that. In other areas, Ayurveda has become really famous as a treatment modality or for offering certain cleanses for the body. There are other places where Ayurveda has become famous for its skin and hair care ingredients. But the truth is, Ayurveda is a complete science of life, which means it has everything to do with how you live, how you prevent disease, how you treat disease, how you interact with others socially, how you remain happy, how you sleep, how you procreate. You just name it. If it has to do with life, it has to do. Ayurveda has it covered.
So beautiful. So I want to kind of compare Ayurveda to how we see health in the Western world and just kind of do like a side-by-side comparison. So in the Western world, the definition of healthy is there is lack of disease, like a diagnosable disease. What's healthy in Ayurveda?
So firstly, growing up, what I realized was health is the freedom of being well. And then I realized in the West, health was the fear of disease or the prevention of disease. So, I mean, I had to personally wrap my head around that, because I grew up with like the freedom of being well. And when you look at Ayurveda traditionally and the definition of health in Ayurveda is, the word is called swasth. Swasth is being home, swa and stha. Swa means self, stha means steady or home. So the idea of just being home in your own body and mind is really health. So it's extremely different. I feel like all the ideas in the West around health are based on treatment. Mm-hmm. All the ideas around health in Ayurveda or the Vedic wisdom, they're based on healing and remaining healed, staying healed.
Mm-hmm. So like being home, right? Being home in your own body. What does it mean to you?
When I can be, right? So I would say anything, physical and mental, any disturbance in any of these two planes for your body takes you away from the present moment. So I could be sitting and talking to you, and if I have a headache, that's half my mind is there. If I'm sitting and talking to you and I'm worried about something else in my future, half my mind is there. So being home to you is having so much ease and flow, both in your mind and body. In that state, when you can keep that present moment and moment after moment, then you're healthy.
Oh, beautiful. Because it's at the end of the day, like there's no, right? Like the true presence is no expectation of the future or no anxiety and also no grief of the past, right? So it's just like very living much in a present moment. And one thing you definitely mentioned is the fact that like in the Western world, we look at health as just very purely physical. And the very little, I'm healthy because I don't have cancer, but I'm anxious and I can't sleep and I really don't like myself and I can't pay attention to anything for 2 minutes. But like, because it's almost like it's become so normal that there's, we don't consider it unhealthy.
Yes. And, to me, I cannot wrap my head around that. I couldn't, right? Because I'm like, imagine if I have to check for disease to check for health, right? Because my only measure of health is lack of disease. I'm constantly checking for disease. Yeah. I mean, this is the ultimate marketplace of hypochondriacs. Like, this is where we create hypochondria, right? Because we're constantly having to say, do I have this? How can I prevent disease? It is a very scary mindset to create versus like living in a life that feels so whole and fulfilling, that you have the right tools and just by the journey that you're having that you don't have to worry about anything else.
So it's also funny because what we understand as I guess healthy, lack of disease, it's become like some of the chronic diseases have been so normalized that are no longer a disease. So for example, for a lot of people, constipation, bloating, it's just become like, it's become so normalized that like not going to the bathroom. I remember there were times like a few years ago where I'd go to the bathroom every 4 or 5 days and I'm like, it's just who I am, No one ever told me like, no, like probably not super healthy for you to not go to the bathroom that often. And I know Ayurveda like refers to how healthy your digestive system is, and how often you go to the bathroom is a good indicator of how things are, moving.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, you know what? Ayurveda does not look at a human being in isolation. Ayurveda understands, and that's especially the work that I do, Aggie, is I've kind of said distilled Ayurvedic principles into three core principles, and you want to follow like these three principles, and we can talk about that a little bit later if we
Oh,
come to that point.
100%.
But basically, it's like, how do you start looking at your body? It's a part of a larger ecosystem. The body has its own ecosystem inside, and then it's part of a larger ecosystem. And as long as you're in this kind of rhythm with the larger ecosystem, and then you have a rhythm within you in your ecosystem, now that rhythm could be like your periods, your sleep and wake cycles, your bowel movements, but everything in the world happens in rhythms. It happens in patterns, and you want to identify those rhythms and those patterns, and then you just want to stick to them. We've kind of created this, right? I mean, one of the things that I find it is appalling is for 4.5 billion years, the earth was a thriving place, right? We only evolved from single cell organisms to like full blown grown mammals and humans with intellects. And over the last 300 years, the amount of damage that we've done is now we're actually questioning from a thriving species that kept evolving and evolving and evolving. Now we're actually questioning the survival, our survival on the planet or the survival of the planet itself. And part of the reason is because we've become so distant from that rhythm, from that order that existed, when we lived in that primitive fashion, you can argue that when we were in touch with all of these systems. So since we're so far away, we're so removed from that. Basically, it's going back. When you say the journey back home is going back to the journey, that wisdom that we know that we carry, that our body already knows. And then we just find tools to go back to that. So in Ayurvedic world, yeah, if I had, you're absolutely right. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm not going every day, I'm not having a bowel movement every day, my first question would be like, are you eating every day? Then you need to go every day. It's like just how your trash would start stinking the house after a day. If you haven't removed it and you're going to open the trash can, it's going to smell different. That's what's happening in your system. It's very, very clear order. There is a beautiful order and you just want to follow that order.
So as a Western woman living in the city, and find a feeling like, oh, cool, like I would love to explore Ayurveda. Like, where do I start? How do I identify whether I'm healthy according to Ayurveda standard? And yeah, what's next for me?
Yeah. And, I mean, to anyone who's listening, I am a woman living in New York City, raising my two daughters, 16 and 11. And I absolutely can live the Ayurvedic lifestyle, and I don't have to wear an orange robe, and I don't have to,
move to India.
I'm not the oddball. Yeah. I'm not the oddball everywhere I go, but it is very possible because Ayurveda is just, there's simple principles. It's actually easier to follow. Like the joke in my family is Nidhi does what she does because she wants to live her life to the fullest, not because, and that is the truth. Like I feel like I have less restrictions. I have more freedom than people who are pursuing other, conventional paths of health. So I think the first place to start, if the question is that, hey, how do I know whether my body is in balance? Then the answer would be, and you answered some of them yourself, Aggie, is how are my sleep cycles? Mm-hmm. How are my moods? How are my bowel movements? How are my periods? And is my mind, at the end of the day, does my mind feel rested? So we're not meant to be like exhausted at the end of the day. But if you can answer all of these questions, and is my weight not fluctuating? If your weight is super yo-yoing, something is happening in the body. It's natural for women especially to put on a little bit of weight right before their cycles, and that's fine. But otherwise, if you can just get these 5 questions, which is rare for everyone to get check marks in these, but if you do, and it's fairly easy to come here, to come back home with these principles, then you know that you're living in accordance with the rhythms that you're meant to.
Beautiful. And so imagine like, okay, I already recognize, okay, there are a few things that are out of whack. And how do I start? What do I start with?
Right.
Like, is Ayurveda just a diet or is it more of a lifestyle?
So, it's both, right? So I'll tell you, this is where, right? Because of this dilemma that I met people come to me again and again with like, listen, where do I start? What do I do? Is why I created a whole method around it, right? I call it the Cosmic Alignment method. And this is where I'm like, I work with 3 simple principles and we just come back from, so it's like instead of getting complicated and looking at all of this information, right? Look, the more information we have outside, the more disconnected we are from knowledge. The first,
Just let's slow down there. So what's knowledge?
so information is what I get from outside there, right? Like somebody tells me, I read it in a book, there's research. The word knowledge has the word knowing in it. The word knowledge comes from, I have the information. I've tested it. I've experienced it. It's gone through my system. It's internalized. It has my wisdom now.
Yeah.
So knowing is very different from hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And information is hearing. Knowledge is knowing.
Yeah, so just implementing the information and seeing if it works for you and to what extent it works for you.
Yes. Yeah. Putting it through the system inside, that's what has happened. Like one of the reasons why I would say deer know that they're plant-based. They don't have to consult an expert in nutrition and nutritionists. And babies at birth know that they eat from their mother's breast, never having used their mouth before in utero. They never use their mouth. The babies don't use their mouth, and they know. And one of the reasons is because they are still connected to that wisdom that's inside, right? And the information kind of colors us sometimes, distorts us. So the three tools that I use with my clients, with the work that I do, is three simple principles, three governing principles, which dictate how all of the planet lives, everything on the planet. And you can use these principles to answer any question. How do you live? How do you exercise? How do you eat? How do you sleep? How do you love? So I'm going to go over the first principle, right? Because I think anybody who's even listening, this is going to plant a seed of how they can start thinking about this with that Ayurvedic insight.
Mm-hmm.
So the first principle is the inner climate, right? So this idea that instead of me looking at health as lack of disease, I understand that there is a climate in which my body thrives. Every time it's gone off that climate, I'm going to invite disease. And, Agi, let you and me do this together, right? Let's explore the inner climate together. So I'll ask you to just take your palm and just exhale into it a few times. Okay. What does it feel like? Is it warm or is it cool?
It's warm.
Okay. Is it moist? Is it dry?
Moist.
It's moist. Okay. So you said warm and moist. All right. Aggie, have you ever gone for a blood test?
Yes, recently actually, yeah.
Okay. And have you ever held the test tube, like the tube in which the blood is there? I don't know if you've ever held it. Do you know what that?
No.
So that usually feels warm. We're warm-blooded mammals, right? So our blood is warm and moist, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mother's milk is warm and moist. I've nursed 2 children. The milk is warm and moist. It comes oozing up warm and moist. Your reproductive fluids are warm and moist.
Yes.
Yeah. We like people who are warm and moist. Feelings like gratitude, compassion, love, they just feel so warm and fuzzy and moist, warm and moist, right? Where do things grow best in the universe? Like where life is thriving?
Bali. I live in Bali as well. And this is just, when I go back, it's warm and moist.
It's warm and moist. It's warm and moist, right? The probiotic environment, right? We talk about the probiotic environment, where good bacteria thrives. Where does good bacteria thrive? Where flora and fauna is warm and moist. Any deviation, and I'm just going to give you a quick example, and this is, of course, like a long, there are many ways how you bring it, right? But warm and moist is that place. The reason why life exists on the planet is, and only on our planet, right? In this entire crazy galaxy, this entire universe, we've only found life here. Because it's where the sun and moon, the heat of the sun and the coolness of the moon bring the warmth, the dehydration the sun does, and then the moisture that happens at nighttime. So we are in the warm and moist place. So life can exist when it's warm and moist. When it's hot and humid, there's inflammation. Outside, you live in Bali. A hot and humid summer means mosquitoes, means parasites, means all of those things. But when it's nice and spring, it's warm and moist. If it's too cold like Alaska, nothing grows. There's no life. And that happens in human bodies, When it's too hot and dry, which is also physically, I can tell you all the conditions that kind of are off climate, are off the spectrum, then there are all of these conditions that come about. So I teach people how to live in that inner climate, in that warm and moist. Doesn't matter if you're coming to me with inflammation, which is hot and humid, with tremendous anxiety and dryness, which means your body has become like a desert.
So basically, essentially what you're saying when someone's just doing this test now, so for those of you who are just like listening to this, you basically covered your mouth with your hand and exhaled, and it's possible for people to exhale colder air or dry air.
No, we are warm and moist. It's the basic nature of breath. Cool. But when there's disease in the body, right? So everybody will have that warm and moist experience because this is what breath is. This is everything in our life, which brings in our bodies, which brings us back to life, our breath, our reproductive fluids, our blood, the flora and fauna, everything that is pro-life in our body is warm and moist already.
Got it.
Any place where there is disease, where there is an accumulation, a coagulation, a tumor, things have become denser. Warm and moist flows. Anytime the stream is warm and moist, it will flow. Every time there's something, but when there is the lack of warm and moist, you'll see things drying up. You'll see things coagulating, blocking. So, like for example, in constipation, I'm just going to use that as an example as we did that inflammation, which is such a big cause of disease, like it's hot and humid. So I work with people to assess their inner climates in their body, and we have a system of doing that. But then we also work that how do you come back to the warm and moist? But not only in your body, in your mind as well, right, Aggie? Like anger, give me just intuitively, what do you think anger is? Is it hot? Is it cold?
Hot. Yeah, I would just say.
Yeah, anger is hot, right? Jealousy can be hot. And anxiety can feel dry. Like after a long period of anxiety, people feel really dry, like dry hair. People lose sleep. Their eyes become dry. Stress starts out as hot and ends up as dry, So but gratitude and compassion keep you in that warm, fuzzy place. Mm-hmm. So the first principle is that, life thrives on warm and moist. And how do you keep coming back there?
But
even
also
through your food. I mean, I work with a diet too.
Yeah, just to retract, because you said something, you have systems to figure out how the environment's on the inside. Like, is there a test that you can do with yourself to check how your body, at what level you are, in your health journey without going to a doctor?
So it is a test, Aggie, that I have created myself, that I work with my clients. So it's not something you're online, but I basically ask the people that I work with to write down their symptoms, right? I don't even introduce them to the idea of this warm and moist, by the way. So before we even get there, I ask them to write down all their symptoms. And then I have a word association chart. And then I say in this word association chart, like, look at your symptoms and look at all the words you would associate with that, right? So people can say hot, inflamed, rashes, fiery, fierce, dry, whatever it is, right? And then as we go ahead in our journey, because I work with people over a period of 21 days in a program, and then when people kind of classify it and they learn about warm and moist, like suddenly they're like, oh, my whole life makes sense to me. I understand why all of this happened, right? And in your mind and body, both you can start understanding the climate. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, when people feel insecure, right? Like, I mean, that's how I teach them how to even deal with social interactions. Like you really check in what it's bringing to you, when you're feeling hot and dry, when, what's happening. And then we find tools to come back to warm and moist, right? So tools in your physical body through diet, exercise, lifestyle, tools in your emotional body, through, whether it's breath work, meditation, music, dance. But we identify for people, to simplify it, Aggie, I tell, we identify either you're a more solar human being or you're a more lunar human being. Solar human beings are those who are hotter and more feisty and doing more and working out extra and just depleting themselves constantly, like almost like on the way to burnout.
Yeah, guilty of that. I'm definitely the sun.
And lunar, and if you've gone excessively lunar, that means you've become a little sedentary, immobile. And in none of those places, life can thrive so well. So you want to be, you want to balance your solar with lunar. In our generation, I'm not surprised that global warming is the problem outside and inflammation is the problem inside. It's the same, to be honest with you. Wow. It's like just this, like doing. Let's get more, let's juice our resources as much as we can.
Yeah, and work on Sundays and 80-hour weeks and, just basically go and never stop.
Undernourish, overwork.
Yeah.
Stay up more, sleep less, like recover less. So of course, right? So basically, and people identify that. So when people look at solar to look at the symptoms, they're like, oh, this makes sense. And then we work. So that is the most important principle, I would say. And it makes sense of your entire life so far. And then I'm going to briefly touch upon the second two, because they're important if anybody's
Well,
listening
before
to
you
this.
do, because I have so many questions before you move on.
Yeah, sure.
So the
Go
first
ahead.
one, in the inner environment, you mentioned heat, you mentioned sun and lunar, but there's also something to be said. I forgot what they're called, but it's the kapha, pitta, and vata. So what are those, and how do they relate to what you just said?
Thank you, Aggie. That's a very, very good question, right? So that's the other thing that popularized Ayurveda. It says, oh, your body has its bio-individuality, which is a dosha.
Dosha,
right?
that's it. Thank you. I forgot
It's
the
a
word.
very jargon. It's a very jargon-loaded understanding, right? And I often feel like Ayurvedic marketers use that as a way to be like, hey, you can do a test and you can find out what your dosha is.
Yeah.
But essentially, so there are three, I'll tell you that. And for anyone who's listening, and I'll tell you how it relates to the inner climate, right? So kapha, we all have all three, firstly, right? We can be leaning heavily on one of these three, and that can cause an imbalance. So according to Ayurveda, all imbalance happens when your doshas are out of balance.
But they're meant to be equal.
Yes, they should all be equal, and we'll talk about what that means, right?
Oh, very cool. I didn't realize. I thought you just said you have one type and you have to kind of stick to this type.
No, and that is where that's the reason why I stay away from this whole dosha business, but it's super interesting. So kapha, pitta, and vata. Kapha, all of those elements in your body which support building, right? Building of new cells, which are pro-life, which keep you in the building phase, which prevent you from degrading, from aging, are all kapha elements. And you need them, right? Because we need our mucus lining. They all have the similar consistency. And I want anyone who's listening to this, Aggie, to be visualizing this, right? Mm-hmm. So kapha elements, everything from your mucus lining to your saliva, to the padding in your joints, the synovial fluids, to your lymph and plasma, to your cytoplasm of your cells. It has the same consistency, like an aloe vera-ish consistency, like a thick. Those are all building elements, and we need them because we are building new cells. We need material all the time. They're all protective. Your synovial fluids are protective. Your mucus lining is protective. Your saliva is protective. And your myelin sheath, which is this like coating on your nerves, is kapha. Mm-hmm. Those are all kapha elements, right? Your body needs them. Then comes pitta elements, right? Because we can't just be building. We'll be like mountains, We'll just be sitting here sedentary beings not doing anything. So we need to start transforming, right? Like transformation is important. And that's when pitta comes into play, right? So what is pitta? It's all these warm, hot elements in the body which allow you to go to the next stage of transformation, which allow for life to happen. So your hormones, your metabolic ability, your gastric juices, the nerves, which have the ability to take signals and literally like an electric system, right? Your mitochondria in the cells, which kind of are the powerhouse. So anywhere where energy is used, generated, transformed, all those heat-led processes in the body. So transformation is extremely important, right? It's like the building is like a childhood is building, and then our adolescence is transformation. Suddenly you have secondary characteristics, hormones set in. And then the third, which is vata. Vata is things in my body need to move, right? The blood needs to be anti-gravity and get to my brain. So that movement is triggered by this concept of vata, which allows for things to move in the body. So think of it like a gentle moving wind in the system. And, whether your arms are moving, your thoughts are moving, substances are moving, your breath, which is air moving, is vata. But what vata also does is it dries things out and it evacuates them. So anything so it's the moving and the depletion. Mm-hmm. Anything that's not needed in the body, right? It's like a gentle moving wind for the movement, and it's a strong wind for the evacuation. So pushing a baby out, urination, defecation, as cells die and they atrophy and they're flushed out of the body. So Vata does all of that. As we die, if I said childhood building was Kapha, and youth, these 3 cycles are seen everywhere, by the way. And they're also my third principle, and I'll talk about that later. But transformation, Pitta is transformation, and Vata is depreciation, movement and depreciation. Right? Now, we all want to be doing that at an appropriate rate. We want to be building where we need to build. We want to be transforming what needs to be transformed, our food, cellular activity. And whatever is not needed in the body, we want it to be pushed out. And whatever needs to move, we want it to move. But when they go out of balance, if let's say a person who's building more may build more tissue, be more sedentary, you just may feel really heavy in their system, may have obesity, plaque, cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes. These are all building diseases, right? Mm-hmm. People who are transforming more, who are more pitta, they can have rashes, inflammation, a hot head, burning digestion, loose stools, psoriasis, all of those. Right? So everything is hot in their body. Mm-hmm. And people who are Vata, they can be more depleted. They can be drier, have more anxiety. They'll be more sleepless. They'll be more bloated in their system. So they can be Vata. So you ideally want to check in with yourself. All of these 3 climates, in exaggeration, are imbalanced. Kapha, so when you go to the inner climate, Kapha is humid and dense. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a Kapha exaggerated in your body, you're humid and dense. You'll have all of these conditions. If you're Pitta exaggerated in your body, you're usually hot and either you're hot and dry or hot and humid, but you're hot in the system. And if you're Vata, then you're dry in the system. None of them are the ideal inner climate. Mm-hmm. But if you're warm and moist, all 3 are balanced. Beautiful. You don't need to detect which one is out of balance. You just come back to warm and moist. Wherever you are, just come back to warm and moist.
Wow. And so that was principle number 1. So where do we go from there? And thank you for answering my question. I was very curious.
No, I thank you for your curiosity. I love it when somebody wants to go deep rather than just touch the periphery, because that's, I think, when you get the most out of it. I'm all about going deeper and not wider. So the second one is, the circadian rhythm, which today is a big deal in the world, right? But Ayurveda understood the rhythms to the T, like the 6 phases of the day. And the whole idea that as is the outside, such as the inside, right? We are diurnal mammals, Aggie, which means we function with the sun. The sun rises and...
I'm so jet lagged. I just got back from Bali to LA. So I tell you for a fact that it's just like, doesn't matter how tired you are, if your body thinks it's the middle of the day, it's 4 a.m. and you're wide awake.
My God, yeah, I am really impressed by you that you're for keeping yourself awake and alive with that jet lag, because it's a drastic time zone shift.
It really is, and I used to do it all the time. I used to travel 300 days a year. Now looking back, I don't know how I did it, because it's just like these are big changes. Like right now in Bali, it is 2:50 a.m. Right, so it's like. And it's my day number 2, so obviously it does feel, it's really interesting. I feel like I'm in like a deep meditation right now. Like,
well, yeah, because you actually higher states.
Yeah, so like the amount of work I have done in the last couple of days, just being home, because I was just all of a sudden, I've done a 21-day fast, and that was like deep meditation, because the ego just turns off because you're so tired. There's no ego, there's no chatter, there's no here or there. And so I was able to like not be on my phone. I literally was like, babe, I think I'm ready for another book. This just like everything came to me, because it feels like I'm like, my body thinks it's 3 a.m. now. So like in a couple of hours, I have done my most productive work, and I want to understand what are the stages of the day, because my body thinks it's 3 a.m. right now. So like
yeah, it's amazing. It's incredible. And I actually want to speak to that, if you don't mind, for just a second.
Yeah.
That Aggie, it's amazing, because the way fasts worked as well. So many spiritual philosophies have fasting, practices have fasting. And it's because when you're not supporting your body with matter, like this is the body of matter, like density. And when you're not supporting your body with matter, is not supporting matter, energy is released, and that energy that's trapped in your body, in your cells, kind of gets released, and that gives you that heightened awareness, and you're not living in this world of matter. You almost are like you said, you're almost in a trance. You're
Yeah.
almost in a different realm, and in that different realm you have access to so much more
It's
than, because you're
incredible.
disconnected
Oh, I lost you. Uh-oh.
from this world of matter.
Oh, okay, I got you back. I was worried for a second. I
Okay,
was like,
okay, I mean,
no, but it's funny
yeah,
how like you don't know until you experience it that
do
I
it.
feel like I don't feel sober in the most beautiful
Yeah,
way.
it's it's like a psychedelic
Yeah,
experience.
yes, it really is. And so I'm curious, why do you think that happens?
Sorry, I think, yeah, it's like a psychedelic experience. You cut out for a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's like a psychedelic experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the body, right, when the body does not have to do digestion, that main process is not happening. It has the opportunity now, with that empty space that's created when the matter is not there. It has the space to move things, to move energy, and energy gets moved.
And it's so
And then
so so beautiful because obviously I'm not hungry. So I wake up and I was like, there's no I
yeah,
can't force myself to have breakfast. I was like, I really need to fast and wait till 3. But you should have seen me at 11 p.m. yesterday. I was like, oh my
yeah.
God, I'll eat anything. But it's funny how, like you said, the moment I guess my body's not putting energy into digestion because I'm jet lagged because it's 3 a.m., I feel so much more aware.
Yeah, and also what we call your endogenous clock is more active than the exogenous clock. So the endogenous clock is what your body is used to based on what you're doing every day. The exogenous clock is how the sun and the moon work. And ideally, like on a long-term basis, we live according to the exogenous clock. I mean, that's how our ancestors lived,
Yeah.
right? In the long term, that's what healthy living is. Like you live according to the clock of the sun and moon. But of course, like I go to India like 7 times a year. So I completely hear you on that, Aggie. Like, how what that feels like when I'm not so much of a zombie when I come back, but when I go to India,
Yeah.
I'm a zombie.
Yeah.
So anyway, so going back to that, like the 6, as is the universe outside, such as the human body inside. So just to put it very simply and quickly, to understand that there's so much opportunity in these 6 phases across day and night. There's 6 phases, and when you understand what your body's natural abilities are in those 6 phases, oh my goodness, like you're swimming with the tide. You just get on that surfboard and like the
So
waves take you where you
what
need
are
to
the
go.
stages? I'm very curious.
So the first one, right, Aggie, and I always have people like to do this with me so that it stays. I think so. Wisdom is in the inquiry. So I'll never that's why I asked you to put your palm here, because I'm like, the minute you stimulate a question within you, the answer that you get is stronger, right? So in the morning, if you've ever walked on grass, Aggie, and living in Bali, maybe you have early morning, 6 o'clock. What does the grass feel like if with your bare feet, or what do you think it might feel like?
In Bali, it's like much cooler and moist, like condensation.
Sorry, Dana, do we have you?
I still see her.
Hello? Hello? Hi, Aggie. I think we
Yeah.
have you back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's my connection or yours, but it's a little unusual. All right. Okay, so Aggie, what does the grass feel like in the morning?
It's wet and cooler.
Oh my goodness, exactly. It's wet and cold, right? That's what the human body is, okay? So in the morning when we wake up, there are so many times where people have morning congestion, right? Like their nasal congestion. And if you've gone to a yoga class in the morning, it's harder to stretch that time because the
Yeah.
body is sluggish and the earth is sluggish. The sun is barely out. That is not a time to load yourself with cold foods right away. So that's a great time to stimulate.
Oh.
The second phase, should we work on this internet? Do you know if it's your connection
I'm
or
not really sure.
mine,
Maybe
or
I'll
do you know
just try
what's
to.
happening?
Let's see. Maybe I'll just open the door. Let me see. Unfortunately, it might be mine because where I live in LA, our Wi-Fi is not very. Like I have no service
Okay,
on my
gonna
phone.
try
Like
this
I have
again.
like one bar, but usually the Wi-Fi is fine. It's just like, yeah, Sorry about that.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
perfect.
have you now. Okay, amazing. Okay, because I want to keep you in the flow.
Yeah,
of these
please.
rhythms. Okay, so in the morning the body is kind of sluggish as well. So you want to make choices which will take you away from that sluggishness, which means exercising. It's the best time to exercise is in the morning. And then for breakfast, a lot of people drink a lot of smoothies in the morning. Not the best time for smoothies because your body is already cold and sluggish. Your juices
Yes.
are not high, and suddenly you're like, and no, you're not going to feel hungry because your digestive fire has shut off right before it started. You said, hello, I'm just going to put a puddle in my system. So morning is a time for movement and a light warm breakfast, right? Between the hours of 10 and 2. I'm not sure if we have you, but
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm going to try again.
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so morning, so after that, right, between the hours of 10 and 2, where our gastric juices are the highest, it's also when the sun is the highest, is also when our So during the hours of 10 and 2 p.m. is when you want to take advantage of this heightened metabolic activity as well as heightened focus and presence. The sun is high. Everything that's heat led is high in the diurnal system. So people who don't eat lunch get hangry. You know, if you don't eat dinner, you'll get cranky. But if you don't eat lunch, you can get hangry because of the heat intensity. So everywhere people do their most productive work in the hours of 10 and 2 because your brain has the most power, most heat, your system has the most heat. Get your productive work done and eat the biggest meal between those hours of 10 and 2. Between 2 and 6, as the sun sets, it gets windy outside. What happens to our desks at 4 p.m.? You're like, oh, right? So there's wind inside. Right? So it's wind outside, it's wind inside. That's your cue to kind of start unwinding. Not always possible, but I tell
Pun
people that if you
intended.
want.
Unwinding.
Sorry?
Pun intended, unwinding.
Basically, right? To get the wind out, you unwind.
Yeah.
So that's the time, you
But
kind of,
it's-
if you need to, go
but
get
it's very
a breath of
powerful.
fresh air. Sorry?
I was just saying it's very powerful because even the words we use to calm down, it
Yes.
literally means unwind. Why does it mean that? Right? It's super powerful because it's literally
That's a very good point. That's a very, very good point that you make. I didn't think about that. Yeah, you unwind to get the wind out. I love it. So that happens between 2 and 6, right? So ideally, you just want to slow down your system and then you come to 6 and 10. Look, after 6, we never ate dinner after 6. Ancestors, in the past, we didn't have electricity. Till we had electricity, Tesla invented electricity, we were not sitting with lanterns over big dinner tables. We were not doing that. People ate supper. People ate soups. They ate stews, That's what an early dinner. So breakfast is light. Get your most productive work done in the afternoon. Eat your biggest meal for lunch, and the evening is light dinner. Start unwinding. By 10 p.m., you want to be in bed because between 10 and 2, the biggest repair happens. Your body, it's easiest for your body to produce melatonin, other hormones, the growth hormone, prolactin, all the repair stuff is heightened at night. All your neurotransmitters that support repair. So between 10 and 2, you do that. Most often you'll see that, Aggie, at 2 o'clock, suddenly people wake up and either in a sweat or to urinate. You mean that's when the cycle of repair is done. It's completed. If that for the people who do wake up after 2, your body starts becoming light again. So if you do wake up after 2, it's usually hardest to fall back asleep. But that's that last phase between 2 to 6 is light sleep. But 10 to 2 is when the magic happens. So you want to get as many hours of sleep in that 10 to 2. And then again, from 6 to 10, the cycle begins, right? So the second principle is to understand these rhythms. Again, when people start following these rhythms, suddenly their bowel movements are back, their periods are back, their skin is great, they're conceiving, moods, because you're just in line with this whole circadian flow outside. You're not making your body. And then the third principle I'll just touch upon briefly, and then if you have any questions, we can say the third principle.
it keeps on happening. I hear you now. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's
Okay.
happening.
No, I think the first half it was great recording. So
Yeah.
life happens, yeah, it's 3 o'clock. It's maybe the time for the unwinding of the internet to happen. I'm kidding. But it's 3 o'clock here. It's 12 p.m. there. So, so Aggie, the last principle is building transformation and decline, that everywhere in life, these three happen. To embrace, right? We come as people like spring is building, summer is transformation, autumn and winter is decline. A fruit will build, it will ripen, it will decay. This happens everywhere. So to accept that this is how you'll see these cycles everywhere. Learning to see these cycles teaches you how to interact with your ecosystem, with people, with foods, anything. Just knowing that this journey is happening and knowing where they are in that journey. Even in relationships, right? We build, like in an initial phase of a relationship, there's a lot of building. If things go well, it can transform into a lifelong partnership. But then if you don't continue the building, then it goes into decline. Even the biggest so these are three cycles, and it's important to understand these cycles because it also allows you in a timely manner to embrace decay when it's inevitable, right? But to also honor the building, right? You want to continue to build as much so you don't have to, expedite your journey towards your decay. But understanding these three cycles allows you to navigate through your life really well. So I basically teach these three principles and how to bring them in all your areas of your life. And honestly, Aggie, that's the only Ayurveda you ever need. And it teaches you everything. Like you can navigate through everything that can possibly exist, whatever your goals are: longevity, periods, fertility, health, love, purpose, all of that.
Beautiful. And so I love that you mentioned, I want to kind of focus on women's health before we go and kind of understand how can we use Ayurveda to improve our fertility, improve our PMS symptoms, and have better periods, apart from living according to the earth cycle.
Right. So of course that is one, right? But I just want us to understand women's bodies for a moment because that answers a lot of questions. So a woman, I say, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I don't know why it's just trying to.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, like a woman starts out in adolescence like a grape, right? Like everything is taut. We're like everything is so nice and stretched out in our bodies. And as we age, women become raisins, right? So we shrivel up, right? We lose those juices. That journey that we make is depletion of fluids, is depletion of juices, depletion of collagen, everything in our life. So keeping ourselves fertile, even if you look outside in the universe, fertility happens when there is irrigation, when there is moisture. So one of the biggest problems that is happening today in the world with women, and when I work with women in fertility, is we've chosen lifestyles that are overly solar, overly hard, excessive protein consumption, working out too much. All of that is leading to a hardening of the system and hormonal imbalance. So these are a few things that I would say, right? If I have to just give simple ideas with this background, I would say, of course, follow the clock, but also eating warm, moist foods. What does this mean? Eating good foods. So eating cooked foods, spiced with good fats. That will be Ayurveda's recipe for bringing back fertility. You need the sun and you need irrigation. That's how you do it in the body as well, right? I would say avoiding a lot of cold foods, cold in temperature, avoiding excessive protein consumptions because protein consumption is linked to testosterone, so I'm not going to say protein is important. You just choose the type of protein that you're consuming and how you're consuming it and how it's breaking down in your body. So you want to just think about that a little bit deeper than just blindly following a protocol is what I say. Also, keeping yourself in your feminine energy has a lot to do with fertility. I have just worked with women who've just kept themselves like when you trigger the feminine side of you, the more lunar side of you, the softer side of you. Look, eggs are always laid in fluids. You know, if your body is hot and dry, it's going to burn the sperm out. I always tell people that just think the fact that the sperm is out of a man's body, it's held in the testes so that it doesn't burn up. It would burn inside the body of a man, right? So you want to keep that body lunar in that. So good fats, good sleep, plenty of rest, following the circadian rhythm, eating warm cooked foods. Honestly, Aggie, is enough.
Wow.
And then you come back. And of course, you can use tools like meditation, breath work, music, dance, all of that to activate what I call your lunar.
Yeah, well, I love that you say that because definitely we're linked to the moon, right? Like if you look at your cycle, we're linked to the moon, and it's so often overlooked. What would you say is like an Ayurvedic? Because you mentioned inflammation. I'm a big fan of curcumin and turmeric, and that was back in the day when I was dating a partner who had arthritis.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
And got to a point like, and he's like adolescent when he could barely like do anything with his hands, and then he started having mega doses of curcumin, and now it's like a very like full on like healthy adult, and you would never know the difference, right? And so all of that is just basically, he's like, I think it's inflammation. So he basically like was obsessed with taking curcumin, turmeric, everything. And so that was the first time where I'm like, like if a lot of disease happens with like inflammation, or like when my body's unhealthy, inflammation comes on, I'm obsessed with turmeric and curcumin. I think it's just like, I take it just like because I love it, but I'm curious to see what does Ayurveda say about inflammation. What does Ayurveda say about, say, better digestion and reducing bloating?
Okay, so I will talk about inflammation first, right? And inflammation is exactly that. When the body, so inflammation, it's the word itself has flame, inflame. It's when the inner climate has become hot and humid, right? And the causes for inflammation can be everything from consumption of excessively hot foods. When we say hot in Ayurveda, it's not hot in temperature. It's like, let's say, excessively spicy foods, excessive fermented foods, fried foods, basically anything that can bring up that, even nightshades like tomatoes. So any of those foods which have either taken in a lot of sun, are just spicy on your tongue, have gone, like fermentation is a process of heat, so overly fermented foods, or you have a lot of fermented foods over a long period of time. Moderation, everything is great, it can actually benefit. But when you've done all of that, the body can be inflamed. So these are consumption causes. But there are also other causes. There are also like lifestyle causes. There's also, so even exercising too much, thinking too much, stressing too much, not repairing enough at night, drinking excessive caffeine and alcohol, those are also consumption causes. But caffeine is hot, that's why it stimulates you. Alcohol, also, you feel the dehydration right away with alcohol. So any of those excessive, it's going to create systemic inflammation in the body. So the more solar you are in your lifestyle, in your consumption, in your mindset, the more inflammation you're going to have. One of the easiest ways to restore inflammation is basically, I'm going to name a few top foods which will help inflammation, right? So, and turmeric is another whole conversation. It has a special effect, but it's usually to be consumed as a food. When it's consumed medicinally, you want to consume it with caution. So I would not tell someone to take curcumin for the rest of your life every single day. If you have a certain condition, you can take some curcumin for a short period of time and that'll really benefit. Over a long period of time, turmeric is to be eaten with your foods, not by itself. For a lifetime. But otherwise, if you want to have foods on a regular basis, which can support, I would say good quality white rice broth. A lot of cultures use rice broth, and that is a great food. Ghee is a great food. Coconut is a great food.
Oh no.
Things. Lunar breath work, more sleep, water sounds, exposure to the moon, more self-touch on your body. All of those are, a walk in nature. Believe it or not, I found more results, Aggie, with these simple practices than I have found sometimes with like potent anti-inflammatories.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, and with bloating, bloating can be for a myriad different reasons. But basically, bloating is when that vata, when the wind has been, when it's become very dry in your gut. That's when bloating happens. Because bloating is such a wide topic, I can just give one quick hack for bloating, which I find really, really works. Actually, two quick hacks is belly button oiling. When you so now this has become a trend to navel oiling. But if you just take even plain sesame or castor oil and you oil before you go to bed, and you use a few drops in your belly button and you kind of massage it for just a few seconds clockwise, can tremendously help. The second thing that can help is doing castor oil packs. Both castor oil has this impact of taking all of the wind in your gut and bringing it down to your pelvis so that it can get out, it can be evacuated through the right route. So these are two simple hacks for bloating that I can say can really, really help with bloating.
Amazing.
And I felt like there was a third you asked, but maybe
Oh,
I'm
the
mistaken.
PMS? And like, if you have
Oh, yes. Yes. So basically, as you move towards the third part of your cycle, which is like the decline part, even your cycle has building, transformation, decline, right? Like the first part of your cycle where the lining is being built up is building. When you ovulate and you're able to conceive, it's the transformation. And then it kind of becomes hot and dry and it goes into decline, right? The third part of your cycle. That is the time when your body is becoming hot and dry from inside. And guess what? It's not a surprise that your mood is becoming hot and dry at the same time. And I'm not surprised that people are craving sugar because everything is so hot and dry that you just want that little grounding. But it is a great time again to bring those same foods that I talked about, those, to give up sugar, to give up a lot of spicy foods. Even if you crave spicy in the first part of your cycle, no worries. In the last part, if you can do more rice broth, you can do, it's like the first two answers are also the third answer. You use castor oil packs because all of that air and wind that's being trapped inside. So castor oil packs, a little bit more ghee, coconut-based foods, rice-based foods, plenty of rest, not working out on your period. How you do every single period from your menarche will determine how you menopause and how you age. I'm a big stickler for doing your period right. And in Ayurveda, doing your period right means eating grounding foods before your periods, resting, not overdoing it for those first 3 days only during your period, bracing your body so it can, everything can flow really well, and just basically slowing down just for 3 days. And so when you do that right, overall your PMS becomes better. There's one hack that I want to give you again is, the nose piercing. Aggie, as you see, I have a nose pierced nose. So these are energy points here. So this was done traditionally, the left nostril nose piercing. And there's a certain point where you do it. And that stimulates a meridian, what we call marma in Ayurveda, which kind of helps to balance your hormones and helps with PMS tremendously.
Wow, no way.
Yeah. All the ornamentation traditionally was done to activate certain energy centers.
Wow, that's so fun. I had no idea. I thought it was just for beauty.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, but it's if you do it strategically, it's to be done in the right spot so it can activate and release blocked energy.
So I'm guessing you don't really have like a strong PMS. You don't have experienced this.
I have learned that I need. You know what? I've learned that when I have more intense days, when I have been more, I crave jalapeno kettle cooked chips, I'll tell you that. But when I can manage to keep away from that, and I can manage to brace myself, I have very good periods. I can just go in and out of my periods. So I tell everybody that you want to work and you want to be prepared for those 7 days and know that your body is having an experience. Your body is naturally hotter and drier, and so will your moods be. And to be loving, to your body in those days, to like slow down, embrace, brace, do all of that. You don't have to be a warrior on every day of your life. You can be a yogi some days, and that's great, We like divide our days between warrior and yogi. And it's great. So if you do that, you end up doing a lot more. Aggie, I feel like I do a lot more than my peers even though I don't rush as much in my own personal life, like I'm not a rushed person at all, because that's extremely solar, the go, go, go,
Yeah.
go, go.
So interesting. Well, I feel really, really intrigued. Nidhi, where can people find you to learn more?
So people can find me on my website, which is nidhi.me, NIDHI.me. You can also find me on my Instagram, which is my_Ayurvedic_life. So you can find me on my Instagram, my Ayurvedic life _ between each of the three words, and nidhi.me.
It was so good chatting to you. I'm so grateful that we're able to connect. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have shared. And I'm so glad we connected.
Thank you so much for all your curiosity, Aggie. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.